My grandpa left me his business and every one of my uncles has stopped returning my calls. I was 26 years old, sitting in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon when my entire life changed direction. Grandpa Lou had died 3 weeks earlier, a quiet death, the kind where he just went to sleep and didn't wake up. At the funeral, my uncles hugged me, told me everything would be okay, asked if I needed anything. They were kind, supportive, it felt like family. That was before the will reading. The business was Lou's Hardware Supply, a family institution in our small town for 43 years. It generated solid revenue, owned its building, had a loyal customer base. It wasn't a fortune, but it was stable, valuable, my grandfather's life work. The lawyer read through the standard stuff, money to my aunts, the house to my mom, and then, the business in its entirety goes to my grandson Michael. I felt my uncle's eyes on me before I even processed the words. My uncle David was the first to leave, just stood up and walked out of the room. My uncle Vincent followed 5 minutes later without saying anything. Uncle Robert shook my hand and said, "Congratulations," but his jaw was so tight I worried his teeth might crack. Then the call stopped. My mom called David asking if he wanted to come to dinner. He said he was busy. Vincent didn't answer at all. When I tried calling Robert directly to ask for his advice about the business, he'd worked there for years before taking a job elsewhere. He said he was in meetings and would get back to me. He never did. I felt betrayed, but worse, I felt confused. The thing is, I'd never wanted this. Grandpa and I had been close, sure. I'd spent summers working at the store, learning the inventory system, listening to his stories about building it from nothing, but I had my own plans. A degree in marketing, a job lined up in the city, a life that was supposed to be somewhere else. For 3 months, I tried to run the business alone. I showed up at 6 a.m. and left after dark. I learned the suppliers, the regulars, the systems, and I hated every second of it. Not because of the work, but because I felt like I was betraying my uncles by existing in a space they clearly wanted. Finally, I did something stupid. I called a family meeting. I sat my uncles down at my mom's kitchen table on a Saturday morning with coffee and bagels, and I just asked, "Why are you all mad at me?" The silence was thick enough to drown in. Then David actually broke down. Turns out my grandfather had promised the business to him years ago. Promised it directly, but then Grandpa had a stroke 5 years back, temporary but scary. He'd gone quiet for a while, reassessing everything. When he came back, he'd changed his mind. Vincent had worked that business every day for 30 years. He'd sacrificed time with his own kids, turned down job offers, stayed local. He thought it was coming to him. Robert had been quietly putting money aside for years, planning to buy the business when Grandpa retired. He'd saved almost half of what he'd need. And me, I'd been the favorite grandson, the one who listened, the one who didn't take it for granted. I listened to all of it, really listened. And then I said something that surprised all of us. "I don't want this. I never asked for this." I explained my actual dreams. Marketing, a career in the city, that I was 26 and being trapped by my grandfather's legacy wasn't fair to any of us. We talked for 6 hours. By the end, we'd found a solution. I'd run the business for 2 years while my uncles worked with me to transition it. David would handle the finances, Vincent would manage operations, Robert would develop expansion plans. In 2 years, we'd restructure it as a partnership or I'd sell it to them at a price we'd determine together. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Those 2 years were actually beautiful. I worked alongside men I'd thought hated me, and somewhere in those long days of counting inventory and solving problems, we became a real family again. Not the kind that pretends everything's fine, the kind that argues, adjusts, and stays anyway. Grandpa Lou's will wasn't about giving me the business. It was about forcing us to finally talk to each other, and that was worth everything.